The crystal vase crashed to the floor as Victoria's voice cut through the bridal suite like a blade. "Get out. You're embarrassing me in front of my guests." Emma stood frozen, her modest floral dress suddenly feeling like a costume in a play she never auditioned for. What Victoria didn't know was that the quiet woman she was dismissing would soon become the most important person in that room. But that revelation was still hours away. Emma Rodriguez had been planning weddings for 8 years, but she'd never encountered a bride quite like Victoria Blackwood. From their first meeting 6 months ago, Victoria had made it clear that she expected perfection, and her definition of perfection was very specific. Everything had to be expensive, exclusive, and impressive. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The venue was the grand ballroom of the Meridian Hotel. The flowers were flown in from Amsterdam, and the guest list read like a who's who of the city's elite. Emma had worked tirelessly to bring Victoria's vision to life. She'd coordinated with dozens of vendors, managed a budget that exceeded most people's annual salaries, and handled every detail with the professionalism that had earned her a stellar reputation in the industry. Her small planning company, Moments by Emma, might not have had the glossy marketing of the big firms, but her clients always left satisfied. What made Emma different from other wedding planners was her genuine care for each couple's story. She believed that behind every wedding was a love story worth celebrating, regardless of the budget. She'd planned intimate backyard ceremonies for young couples just starting out, and she'd orchestrated million-dollar affairs for society families. To Emma, the price tag never mattered as much as the joy on the couple's faces. Victoria's wedding was set to be Emma's biggest project yet. The bride came from old money, the kind of family that had their name on hospital wings and university buildings. Her fiancé Michael Sterling was equally wealthy, having built a tech empire before turning 30. Their wedding was the social event of the season, with 300 guests and a price tag that could have funded a small town's annual budget. Emma had met Michael only a handful of times during the planning process. He seemed like a genuinely nice man, soft-spoken and kind, though he often appeared overwhelmed by the scale of the celebration Victoria had envisioned. During their meetings, he'd quietly suggest simpler alternatives, only to be overruled by his fiancée's grander ambitions. Emma sensed there was more depth to him than his reserved demeanor suggested. The morning of the wedding arrived with typical chaos. Emma was at the venue by 6 a.m., her clipboard in hand and her phone buzzing with last-minute vendor questions. She wore her standard wedding day outfit, a simple navy dress that was professional but unobtrusive, comfortable flats that would survive 12 hours on her feet, and minimal jewelry that wouldn't catch on anything as she moved through her duties. Emma had learned early in her career that wedding planners should blend into the background. The day belonged to the couple and their families, not to her. Her job was to ensure everything ran smoothly while remaining practically invisible. She'd perfected the art of being everywhere and nowhere at once. By 10 a.m., the first crisis had already emerged. The florist had delivered the wrong shade of roses, the musicians were running late due to traffic, and the catering staff was missing 2 key members who'd called in sick. Emma handled each problem with calm efficiency, making phone calls, rearranging schedules, and finding creative solutions. This was what she excelled at, turning potential disasters into minor inconveniences. Victoria arrived at noon for hair and makeup, bringing with her an entourage of bridesmaids and family members. The bridal suite buzzed with activity as stylists worked their magic and photographers captured every moment. Emma coordinated the schedule, ensuring everyone would be ready on time while managing the various personalities and egos in the room. As the afternoon progressed, Emma noticed Victoria's mood growing increasingly tense. The bride snapped at her makeup artist for not blending her eyeshadow perfectly, criticized her sister's choice of accessories, and sent the photographer away twice for taking unflattering angles. Emma recognized the signs of pre-wedding stress, but Victoria's behavior seemed more hostile than nervous. The real tension began when Victoria's mother, Patricia Blackwood, arrived. Patricia was a formidable woman who'd clearly passed her exacting standards down to her daughter. She surveyed the bridal suite with a critical eye, finding fault with everything from the lighting to the temperature. Emma quickly adjusted the thermostat and repositioned some lamps, doing her best to accommodate the complaints. It was Patricia who first made the comment that would set the tone for the rest of the day. As Emma bent down to adjust Victoria's train for a photograph, Patricia looked her up and down with obvious disdain. "Victoria, darling, couldn't you have hired a planner who looks more appropriate for an event of this caliber?" The room fell silent. Emma felt her cheeks flush, but she continued working on the dress, pretending she hadn't heard. She'd dealt with difficult family members before, and she knew the best response was no response at all. Her job was to make the day perfect, not to defend herself against personal attacks. Victoria looked at Emma as if seeing her for the first time. You know, Mother has a point. This is the most important day of my life, and I'm surrounded by the most influential people in the city. Perhaps you could have made more of an effort with your appearance. Emma straightened up, her professional smile never wavering. I apologize if my attire is distracting. Would you like me to step out while you have your photos taken? That's not the point, Victoria continued, her voice taking on the imperious tone she'd been using all day. This is about standards, about understanding what's appropriate for different levels of society. I would have expected someone in your position to recognize that. The other women in the room exchanged uncomfortable glances. Even the bridesmaids who'd been giggling and chatting moments before seemed unsure how to respond. Emma felt the familiar knot in her stomach that came with being judged for things beyond her control, but she maintained her composure. I understand your concerns, Emma said quietly. My focus has been on ensuring every detail of your wedding is perfect. If you'd prefer, I can coordinate the rest of the day from behind the scenes. Patricia laughed, a sharp sound that filled the awkward silence. Behind the scenes is probably where you belong anyway. Really, Victoria, I don't know what you were thinking hiring someone so common for such an exclusive event. The word hung in the air like a slap. Common. Emma had been called many things in her life, but never that. She'd worked her way through college, built her business from nothing, and earned the respect of her peers through dedication and skill. Her worth wasn't measured by her wardrobe or her family's bank account, but by the quality of her work and the happiness of her clients. Victoria seemed emboldened by her mother's support. I mean, look at that dress. It's something you'd wear to a job interview at a department store, not to coordinate a wedding that's going to be featured in 3 different magazines. Emma's hands trembled slightly as she packed up her planning materials. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, selecting something that was professional, comfortable, and appropriate for a working event.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
She wasn't a guest at this wedding, she was staff. Her role was to work behind the scenes, not to compete with the guests for attention. Perhaps, Victoria continued, you could learn something from observing how real ladies dress and behave. This crowd represents a level of society you'll probably never encounter again. The bridesmaids looked mortified. One of them, a young woman named Sarah, finally spoke up. Victoria, that's really not necessary. Emma has done an amazing job with everything. But Victoria was on a roll now, and her mother's approving nods only encouraged her. I'm just being honest. Someone in her position should understand her place. We're not equals here, and pretending we are is just awkward for everyone. Emma felt something inside her crack, but she held on to her professionalism with both hands. She'd dealt with difficult clients before, but nothing quite like this. The personal attacks were crossing lines that had nothing to do with her work performance. I apologize if I've given you any reason to question my professionalism, Emma said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Your wedding is my priority, and I want to ensure it's everything you've dreamed of. It's not about professionalism, Patricia interjected. It's about knowing your place in the social order. Some people are born to serve, and others are born to be served. There's nothing wrong with either role as long as everyone understands which one they occupy. The room was thick with tension now. Even Victoria seemed to sense that her mother had gone too far, but she didn't back down. Instead, she doubled down on the attack. Exactly. And frankly, Emma, your whole aesthetic is just not what I envisioned for my wedding team. You look like someone who shops at discount stores and thinks Olive Garden is fine dining. That's not the image I want associated with my special day. Emma felt her phone buzz in her pocket. Michael's name appeared on the screen and she glanced at the message. Everything okay up there? The guys are ready whenever you need us. She looked up to find Victoria and Patricia watching her with matching expressions of disdain. The other women in the room had gone quiet, some staring at their phones or pretending to be busy with their makeup. The atmosphere had shifted from pre-wedding excitement to uncomfortable confrontation. I should check on the ceremony preparations, Emma said, moving toward the door. The musicians have arrived and we'll need to start seating guests in about an hour. Yes, that's exactly where you belong, Victoria said with a dismissive wave. Behind the scenes, making sure everything runs smoothly so the important people can enjoy themselves without having to think about the help. Emma paused at the door, her hand on the handle. For 8 years she'd prided herself on her ability to handle any situation with grace and professionalism. She'd dealt with demanding clients, impossible timelines, and budget constraints that would have broken other planners. But this felt different. This wasn't about the work, it was about her worth as a person. She thought about all the couples she'd helped over the years, the grateful hugs from brides and grooms, the thank you cards that filled a drawer in her office. She thought about the young couple whose entire budget was less than Victoria's flowers alone, but whose joy had filled the community center where they'd held their reception. She thought about her parents, who'd worked multiple jobs to put her through school, and who'd taught her that dignity came from within, not from external validation. "You're right," Emma said quietly, opening the door. "I do belong behind the scenes. That's where the real work happens." As she closed the door behind her, she could hear Victoria's voice rising again, probably continuing her commentary about inappropriate staff and social hierarchies. Emma leaned against the wall for a moment, taking a deep breath and centering herself. She had a wedding to coordinate, regardless of how the bride treated her. The ceremony was set to begin in 45 minutes, and there were still a dozen details that needed her attention. The musicians needed their final sound check, the ushers needed their instructions, and the photographers needed to be positioned correctly. Emma threw herself into these tasks, grateful for the distraction they provided from the humiliation she'd just experienced. As she worked, she found herself wondering about Michael. He'd seemed so different from Victoria during their planning meetings, more interested in the meaning of the ceremony than the spectacle surrounding it. She hoped he knew what he was getting into, marrying into a family that seemed to measure people's worth by their bank accounts and social connections. The guests began arriving right on schedule, a parade of expensive cars and designer outfits. Emma watched from her position near the coordinator's table as society's elite filed into the ballroom, their conversations a mix of business deals and social gossip. She recognized several faces from newspaper society pages and charity event photos. Everything was proceeding perfectly according to plan. The flowers were stunning, the musicians were flawless, and the lighting created exactly the romantic atmosphere Victoria had requested. Despite the personal attacks she'd endured, Emma felt a professional satisfaction in seeing her months of planning come together seamlessly. She was adjusting the guest book table when she noticed a commotion near the entrance. Michael had arrived with his groomsmen, and he was scanning the room with an intensity that seemed unusual for a groom checking out his wedding venue. His eyes found Emma across the room, and he started walking in her direction with determined steps. Emma's heart began to race. Had Victoria complained to him about their earlier confrontation? Was she about to be fired on the spot, in front of 300 wedding guests? She straightened her shoulders and prepared for whatever was coming, determined to maintain her dignity no matter what happened next. Michael Sterling crossed the ballroom with purposeful strides, his expression serious in a way that made several guests pause their conversations to watch. Emma felt her pulse quicken as he approached, wondering if Victoria had already filled his ears with complaints about her inappropriate appearance and common background. She braced herself for another confrontation, another reminder of her supposed place in the social hierarchy. Instead, Michael stopped directly in front of her and smiled with genuine warmth. "Emma, there you are. I've been looking for you." His voice carried none of the condescension she'd grown accustomed to from his bride's family. "I wanted to thank you personally before the ceremony begins. Everything looks absolutely incredible." Emma blinked in surprise, unsure how to respond to unexpected kindness after the brutal hour she'd just endured. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling. I'm just doing my job. Please call me Michael, and what you've done here goes far beyond just doing a job." He gestured around the transformed ballroom, taking in the elegant draping, the perfect lighting, and the seamless coordination of every detail. "You've created something magical. Victoria is going to be thrilled." The irony wasn't lost on Emma. Victoria had spent the last hour criticizing everything about her, while her future husband was praising the very work Victoria had dismissed. She managed a professional smile, though her earlier encounter still stung. "I'm glad you're pleased with everything. Your wedding should be starting in about 20 minutes. Is there anything you need from me before the ceremony begins?" Michael studied her face for a moment, as if sensing something beneath her polished professionalism. "Actually, there is something. I know this might sound strange, but I'd like you to be more visible during the reception. Don't hide in the background like most planners do. I want our guests to see the person responsible for making this day perfect." Emma felt a flush of panic. After Victoria's comments about her appearance and social standing, the last thing she wanted was to be more conspicuous among the elite guests. "That's very kind, but I prefer to stay behind the scenes. It allows me to handle any issues that arise without disrupting the celebration." "I understand your reasoning, but I insist." Michael's tone was gentle but firm. "You've worked too hard on this to be invisible. Besides, I have a feeling Victoria would want the same thing once she sees how perfectly everything has turned out." If only he knew, Emma thought. but she simply nodded, not wanting to burden the groom with details of his bride's earlier behavior. Of course, whatever makes you both happy. As Michael walked away to greet other guests, Emma felt a mixture of appreciation and dread. His kindness was a stark contrast to the treatment she'd received upstairs, but his request to be more visible during the reception felt like a recipe for disaster. She could already imagine Victoria's reaction to seeing her mingling among the distinguished guests. The ceremony began precisely on schedule. Emma coordinated from the back of the ballroom, ensuring the processional music cued perfectly and the photographers captured every moment. Victoria looked stunning in her custom gown, a vision of bridal perfection as she walked down the aisle. For a moment, Emma forgot their earlier confrontation and felt the familiar joy that came with seeing months of planning culminate in this perfect moment. The vows were traditional and elegant, spoken in voices that carried clearly through the ballroom's excellent acoustics. Michael's words were heartfelt and sincere, while Victoria's were polished and appropriate. As they exchanged rings and sealed their union with a kiss, the guests erupted in applause, and Emma felt a professional satisfaction in another successful ceremony. The cocktail hour proceeded flawlessly. Guests mingled on the hotel's outdoor terrace, sipping champagne and enjoying the string quartet performance. Emma moved efficiently between the various vendors, ensuring the dinner service would be ready on time and addressing the small issues that inevitably arose during large events. It was during this transition that she encountered Patricia Blackwood again. Victoria's mother approached with two other elegantly dressed women, their conversation clearly focused on Emma's presence among the staff. "I was just explaining to Margaret and Helen about our situation with the wedding coordinator," Patricia said loudly enough for Emma to hear. "Some people simply don't understand the importance of maintaining appropriate standards." Margaret, a woman with silver hair and enough diamonds to fund a small country, looked Emma up and down with obvious disapproval. How unfortunate. For an event of this magnitude, one would expect a coordinator who understands the social requirements. Exactly, Patricia continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Poor thing probably thinks she belongs here among the guests. It's almost pitiful, really." Emma continued arranging the place cards, her hands steady despite the heat rising in her cheeks. She dealt with condescending clients before, but the public nature of this humiliation was something new. Other guests were beginning to notice the conversation, their curious glances adding to her discomfort. Helen, the third woman in the group, seemed slightly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Perhaps we should focus on celebrating Victoria's happiness," she suggested diplomatically. "Of course," Patricia replied with a wave of her manicured hand. "I just believe in maintaining certain standards. When people forget their place in society, it affects everyone around them." The word places hit Emma like a physical blow. She thought of her parents, hard-working people who'd instilled in her the values of dignity and perseverance. She thought of the business she'd built through late nights and weekend work, earning the trust of clients through excellence and dedication. She thought of all the couples whose weddings she'd made perfect, regardless of their budget or social status. "Excuse me," Emma said quietly, stepping away from the place card table. She needed air, space and a moment to collect herself before the reception began. The last thing she wanted was to let these women see how deeply their words had affected her. She stepped onto a quiet corner of the terrace, taking deep breaths of the evening air. The sun was setting, casting golden light across the hotel's manicured gardens. In a few minutes, she'd need to coordinate the couple's entrance to the reception, but for now she allowed herself this moment of solitude. "Emma," Michael's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him approaching with concern written across his features. "Is everything all right? You look upset." Emma forced her professional smile back into place. "Everything's fine. Just taking a moment before we begin the reception. The couple's entrance is scheduled for 7:30. Michael studied her face more carefully. "Something's wrong. I can see it. Has someone said something to upset you?" The kindness in his voice nearly broke her composure. After hours of subtle and not so subtle insults, his genuine concern felt like a lifeline. But she couldn't burden the groom with complaints about his new in-laws on his way. "Really, I'm fine. Just tired. Planning events this size is exhausting." "Emma, I may not know you well, but I can tell when someone is being treated poorly. You've been nothing but professional and excellent from the moment we hired you. If someone has made you feel unwelcome or uncomfortable, I want to know about it." His sincerity was unmistakable, and Emma felt her carefully maintained walls beginning to crumble. It's not important. Today is about you and Victoria, not about me. It is important, Michael said firmly. Anyone who contributes to our happiness today matters to me. That includes you. Now please, tell me what's happened. Emma looked into his eyes and saw genuine care, not the obligation of a client checking on his vendor. Against her better judgment, she found herself speaking honestly for the first time all day. Your mother-in-law and some of the other guests have made it clear that they find my presence inappropriate for an event of this caliber. They've suggested that I don't understand my place in the social order, and that my appearance reflects poorly on your wedding. Michael's expression darkened. They said what? It's not uncommon, Emma said quickly, not wanting to cause drama on his wedding day. Some clients have strong opinions about staff appearance and behavior. I should have anticipated it and dressed more appropriately. You should have done nothing different, Michael said with surprising intensity. You look professional and elegant, and more importantly, you've created the perfect wedding for us. Anyone who suggests otherwise is completely out of line. Before Emma could respond, Victoria appeared beside them, her expression curious and slightly annoyed. Michael, what are you doing out here? Our guests are waiting for us to begin the reception. I was just talking with Emma about the evening schedule, Michael replied, his tone carefully neutral. Victoria's gaze shifted between them, and Emma saw recognition flicker in her eyes. Oh yes, our little coordinator. I hope she's been keeping a low profile as we discussed. The dismissive tone was too much for Michael. Actually, Victoria, I've been thinking we should do something special to acknowledge Emma's incredible work. She's made our day absolutely perfect. Victoria's smile became strained. That's sweet, darling, but really not necessary. She's just doing what we paid her for. She's done far more than that, Michael said, his voice gaining strength. And from what I'm hearing, some of our guests have been less than kind to her. That's unacceptable. Emma felt the tension crackling between the newlyweds and desperately wanted to escape before their disagreement escalated. Please, don't worry about it. I'm used to staying in the background. It's really fine. It's not fine, Michael said, looking directly at his new wife. Emma has worked tirelessly to make our wedding perfect, and she deserves to be treated with respect and gratitude, not condescension. Victoria's composure began to crack. Michael, you're being dramatic. I'm sure no one meant any harm. Perhaps Emma simply misunderstood some innocent comments. Did you misunderstand when my mother called you common? Michael asked Emma directly. Emma felt trapped between the couple's escalating conflict. I think there might have been some miscommunication about expectations. There was no miscommunication, Michael said firmly. There was rudeness and snobbery, and it stops now. He turned back to Victoria. This woman has given us the wedding of our dreams. She's been professional, talented, and gracious even when treated poorly. That ends tonight. Victoria's face flushed with embarrassment and anger. Michael, you're making a scene over nothing. She's staff. There are natural boundaries that need to be maintained. She's a human being who deserves basic respect, Michael replied. And she's not just staff. She's an artist who's created something beautiful for us. The conviction in his voice surprised Emma. She'd worked with many grooms over the years, but few had ever stood up for her in such a direct way. Most were content to let their brides handle all wedding-related decisions and conflicts. I appreciate your concern, Emma said carefully, but I don't want to cause any problems between you two on your wedding day. You're not causing any problems, Michael assured her. You're revealing problems that already existed. Victoria looked between her new husband and the wedding planner, clearly calculating her next move. The guests were beginning to filter back inside for dinner, and the photographer was gesturing for the couple to join them. Fine, Victoria said with forced brightness. If it's so important to you, Michael, then of course we should acknowledge Emma's work. But right now, we need to go inside. Our guests are waiting. As they walked back toward the ballroom, Emma felt a mixture of gratitude and apprehension. Michael's support meant more than he could know, but she worried about the consequences of his intervention. Victoria was clearly unhappy with the turn of events, and Emma would have to work with her for the rest of the evening. The reception dinner proceeded beautifully despite the underlying tension. Emma coordinated the service flawlessly, ensuring each course was served at the perfect temperature and timing. The speeches were heartfelt, the wine selection was praised, and the overall atmosphere was exactly what Victoria had envisioned. It was during the cake cutting that everything changed. As Emma positioned the photographer for the perfect angle, She heard Patricia Blackwood's voice behind her, louder than before, and clearly intended for a wider audience. "I still can't believe the nerve of some people," Patricia was saying to a group of guests, "trying to insert themselves into situations where they clearly don't belong. It's almost embarrassing to watch." Several guests looked uncomfortable, but Patricia continued, "I suppose when you come from nothing you might not understand the difference between serving at an event and being invited to one." Emma felt every word like a physical blow, but she continued focusing on her work. The photographer was waiting for her signal, and the cake cutting was an important moment that needed to be captured perfectly. "Some people need to learn their place," Patricia added with a laugh that carried across the nearby tables. That's when Michael's voice cut through the chatter, clear and strong enough for half the ballroom to hear. "You're absolutely right, Patricia. Some people do need to learn their place." The entire reception seemed to pause as guests turned toward the bride and groom's table. Michael stood, champagne glass in hand, and looked directly at his new mother-in-law. "Emma Rodriguez has shown us exactly where her place is," Michael continued, his voice carrying the confidence of someone accustomed to commanding attention. "Her place is among the most talented, hard-working, and gracious people I've ever had the privilege to work with." Victoria tugged at his sleeve, clearly wanting him to sit down, but Michael gently pulled away and stepped toward Emma. "For months, Emma has worked tirelessly to create the perfect wedding for Victoria and me. She's handled every detail with skill and creativity that frankly amazed me. She's been professional, patient, and kind, even when others have been less than welcoming." Emma felt her face burning as hundreds of eyes focused on her. This was exactly the kind of attention she'd spent her career avoiding. "But more than that," Michael continued, "Emma has reminded me of something important. True class isn't about money or social connections. It's about how you treat people, especially those who can't necessarily help you advance your own interests." The ballroom was completely silent now. Even the serving staff had stopped moving as they listened to the groom's unexpected speech. "Emma, would you please join Victoria and me up here?" Michael asked, extending his hand toward her. Emma shook her head slightly, not wanting to be the center of attention at someone else's wedding, but Michael's expression was insistent, and she realized that refusing would cause even more of a scene. As she walked toward the head table, she could feel the weight of every gaze in the room. Some guests looked curious, others confused, and a few appeared openly hostile. Victoria's face was a mask of forced composure, while Patricia looked like she might faint from mortification. "I want everyone to know," Michael said as Emma reluctantly joined them, "that Emma didn't just plan our wedding, she created magic. Every beautiful detail you've enjoyed tonight is a result of her vision and hard work." He turned to face Emma directly. "Thank you for making our day perfect, despite the challenges you faced. You've shown more grace under pressure than most people show in a lifetime." The applause that followed was uncertain at first, then grew stronger as guests responded to Michael's obvious sincerity. Emma felt tears threatening and fought to maintain her composure. Victoria finally stood, her smile brilliant but strained. "Yes, of course, Emma has done lovely work." Her tone suggested she was anything but pleased with the public acknowledgement. As the applause died down and conversations gradually resumed, Emma found herself surrounded by guests who suddenly wanted to compliment her work and ask about her services. The same people who'd been whispering about her inappropriate presence were now treating her like a celebrity. Patricia Blackwood approached with obvious reluctance, her earlier confidence replaced by embarrassed uncertainty. "Emma, I hope you'll forgive any misunderstandings from earlier. I'm sure you can appreciate how stressful wedding days can be for families." Emma looked into the older woman's eyes and saw not genuine remorse, but damage control. Patricia was sorry she'd been called out publicly, not sorry for her behavior. "I understand," Emma replied diplomatically. Weddings bring out strong emotions in everyone. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Michael found Emma one final time. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "I had no idea anyone was treating you poorly until tonight. That should never have happened." "You don't owe me anything," Emma replied. "You stood up for me when you didn't have to. That means more than you know. It means you're a good person who deserved better treatment." Michael said simply, "I hope this experience won't prevent you from working with other clients from our social circle. Not everyone is like Patricia and her friends." Emma smiled genuinely for the first time all evening. "I've learned that every group has its difficult people and its kind ones. Tonight I met both types, As Emma packed up her materials and coordinated the final vendor departures, she reflected on the day's events. She'd endured public humiliation and personal attacks, but she'd also experienced something unexpected, the power of having someone stand up for what was right. Victoria approached as Emma was loading her car. "I hope you understand that Michael can be overly dramatic sometimes," she said with forced casualness. "He doesn't always understand the social dynamics of events like this." Emma looked at the new bride, seeing not the radiant woman from the ceremony, but someone who'd allowed her family's prejudices to guide her behavior. "I think your husband understands more than you might realize." As Emma drove home through the quiet city streets, she thought about the lesson the evening had taught her. She'd spent years trying to be invisible, to blend into the background, and avoid challenging anyone's preconceptions, but sometimes being invisible meant allowing injustice to flourish. Michael had shown her that standing up for what's right matters more than maintaining false peace. His willingness to confront his own family and social circle on her behalf had been a gift she hadn't expected. The next morning, Emma woke to find her phone flooded with messages from potential clients who'd been at the wedding. Word of Michael's speech and the beautiful event had spread quickly through the city's social networks. For the first time in her career, people were seeking her out not just for her planning skills but for her character. One message stood out from the rest. It was from Helen, one of the women who'd witnessed Patricia's earlier comments. "Dear Emma, I wanted to apologize for not speaking up last night when I should have. Your professionalism and grace were inspiring. I'd love to discuss planning my daughter's engagement party with you." Emma smiled as she read through the messages. She'd gone to that wedding worried about fitting in with a world she didn't fully understand. Instead, she'd discovered that her own values were exactly what that world needed more of. She didn't need to change to accommodate their prejudices. They needed to change to accommodate basic human decency. As she prepared for another day of creating perfect moments for couples in love, Emma felt a new confidence in her place in the world. She belonged wherever her skills and kindness were needed, regardless of what anyone else thought about her background or appearance. The woman who'd been called pathetic and common had proven herself to be neither. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to accept someone else's diminished vision of your worth. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, someone else will refuse to accept it too. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.